we are impressed by Mexico's emergence as an economic and political power and of its leadership in this region. In all of Latin America, Mexico is the country with which we have the most comprehensive institutional relationship. Mexico and the European Union, we share strong common views on many international issues, such as human rights, development cooperation policy, free trade, and climate change. Actually, the reason why I'm here in Mexico City right now is that we are working very closely with our Mexican friends who have just co-hosted a meeting with the Americans for the 17 biggest economies, you could also say the 17 biggest emitters of the world. And I think that this is just one example of how together Mexico and Europe help each other to push an international agenda forward. I think that if there is one thing we share, Europe and Mexico, in the climate negotiations, then it is this view that if not all of the world's big economies take their fair share of the responsibility of handling climate change, then the world will not be able to cope with this global challenge. I think we are still wasting a bit too much time internationally to discuss whether only some of us should take our fair responsibility. And that is why Mexico's strong leadership here that sends a very, very strong signal also to other countries who are emerging as big economies, that in the world we live in the 21st century, we are really interdependent. What I do affects my neighbor. What my neighbor does or does not do, that affects me. And we have really to grasp that also when it comes to a challenge like climate change. As we just heard from the ambassador, we have had a tough crisis, as you know, in Europe in recent years. Yet we have decided that we must continue to make our societies turn into low-carbon societies, focusing on renewables, focusing on efficiency, focusing on a better way of using nature and natural resources. I know that some would say, can we afford it? Probably that is also a question you will hear here in Mexico. Now when we are busy creating jobs, handling the economic challenges, can we also afford to do something about, for instance, climate and environment? I would say we can't afford not to. The way we tend to see this in Europe is that we have three crises. An economic crisis where now we are getting out of the tunnel and we are now starting to see increased growth rates. We have a social and job challenge, 26 million unemployed people in Europe. And then we also still have the climate change challenge. It just didn't go away just because we became busy handling the economic crisis. Right now we see with the conflict with Russia over Ukraine, also the political costs of being too dependent on imported fossil fuels. Actually, Europe today pays more than 1 billion euros every day to pay for our imported fossil fuels. It goes without saying that it's not just good for climate if you reduce that kind of dependency. It is also good for the economy and it gives you more political freedom. So that is basically how we see it in Europe. That is why we are trying to continue to decouple so that we will continue to have economic growth, but at the same time our ecological footprint of the world of the 21st century will be less. I believe, and I will end with that today in Europe, celebrating Schuman's Day, many Europeans going to the European Parliament elections later this month, they sometimes think about this European Union. Is it not going into too many details? Do we have to work as much together? Wasn't it easier before? I can just tell you, Europe's story, as we also heard it from the ambassador, Europe's story is one big story about problems, conflicts, wars. But what the European Union has actually managed to do is to take care that we now have a way of dealing with all these conflicts and potential threats in a peaceful manner. That is what the European Union can do. And that is why I believe for the future, be it trade, be it the economy, be it how to innovate to the challenges of the 21st century, or be it energy challenges, climate challenges. We will not need less European cooperation in Europe. We will need to cooperate still more in a world where we see other economies, some of them also with another set of values, sort of taking up more and more space globally. We will still need to work not less together, but more together in Europe. And let me finish by saying, I think actually many were a bit surprised, also from outside Europe, that we managed to get through the crisis. It has not been easy, but I think that today we have something to celebrate. Once again, we proved that when we are pooling our resources, when we are working jointly and peaceful together, then Europe can still manage to be a leading player in the world. So that is reasons to celebrate. I do not know if you have your glasses, but then there should be a toast for that later when we come to that. Thank you very much for your attention.